In a game about a new student at Hogwarts, classes should not feel like side content. They should be one of the central pillars of the player's experience. In classes, players should learn magic, meet professors, develop skills, build routine, and feel like a student at the school. The player is technically a student in Hogwarts Legacy, but the game almost never asks them to live like one. There is no school schedule, no academic pressure, no rules, and progression is completely detached from the educational side of the school. For the rewrite, classes must become much more important. The game is not aimed to feel like a repetitive classroom simulator, but we still want Hogwarts to feel like a school. Players should learn magic through the act of being educated, not through detached assignments. The first time the player attends charms, defense against the dark arts, herbology, or potions, there is a real sense of novelty. The professors are introduced, the classrooms are shown, curriculum is taught, and the fantasy of being a Hogwarts student briefly comes into focus. But this fantasy doesn't expand to become the structure of the game. Classes exist once or twice, and the game moves on from them. Hogwarts feels less like the daily home of the player, and more like one location in a large open world. The school is beautiful, but the experience of attending school is limited. This builds a disconnect between the premise and the game itself. The player is supposed to be a new student, working hard to catch up on everything they missed in the past 4 years. Instead, the progression works more like a generic fantasy RPG and doesn't support the specific fantasy of being educated at the famous school of witchcraft and wizardry. Classes feel more decorative than foundational. It feels as if the developers are paying lip service to the premise but not following through on the fantasy. They introduce subjects and professors, but don't make them feel like an ongoing part of the player's life. Classes should shape the game, the progression, the professors, etc. If Hogwarts is going to be the center of our rewrite, then attending Hogwarts has to matter. The calendar system is a major change for the rewrite, so I'll briefly summarize it before we begin. Rather than letting the player move through Hogwarts as though time barely exists, there will be a calendar system as the player moves through each day. On a normal weekday, the player follows a class schedule, an example of which is shown on screen. The day is divided into several time periods, with lessons throughout and free time in between. Free time allows for players to explore the castle, study, talk to classmates, complete character quests, visit professors, or simply head to their next class. We don't want the calendar to feel oppressive or overly realistic, but to give the game a sense of routine. You only have a limited amount of time, so what you choose to do matters more. Most classes that the player attends will be what I call, for this rewrite at least, standard classes. These are ordinary lessons that take place throughout the school year when the player is not learning a new spell, improving a spell, participating in a story event, etc. We want to preserve the rhythm of school life without making the player sit through 3 or 4 full lessons every day. In practice, these are short cutscenes. Students enter the classroom, the professor lectures, students practice or take notes, and then the class ends. There are many variations so that players don't see the same ones over and over again, but there's nothing special to them. They may last less than a minute, since the goal is not to make it a major activity, but to make the school schedule feel real. Of course, these classes still matter mechanically. Attending these classes either maintains or slightly improves the player's marks in that subject, depending on their current marks. Missing one class wouldn't ruin everything, but repeated absences would bring about consequences. The player may lose marks, need to catch up, or may attract attention from certain professors. The second type of classes are what I'm calling interactive classes. These are ordinary, standard classes, but once in a while, the professor will ask a question to the student to see if they are paying attention. Again, there'll be a minute or so, but they are aimed at making the classroom feel less passive. The player might be asked about wand movements for a particular spell, the order of potion ingredients, the correct defensive charm, etc. Correct answers should be rewarded by a small boost in a player's marks, regardless of their current marks, a few house points, an increase in the relationship with a professor, etc. Conversely, incorrect answers would have the opposite effect. The purpose of these types of classes is to strike a sort of balance. If every class is a cutscene, it may become too passive, and if every class were fully interactive, it may become repetitive and boring. We want the player to feel as though they are participating in the education while still keeping a reasonable pace. The final type of class would be the major classes. These are classes where the player is learning something new or unlocking an upgraded version of a spell. The goal is to make each of these classes like the Summoner's Court lesson, where they are more involved on the player's side. Defense against the dark arts might feature dueling drills or defensive exercises. Potions may require students to prepare ingredients and follow brewing steps. Care of magical creatures, or beast studies, will become a field lesson where the professor takes students beyond the school grounds to observe or help with creature dens. These are the classes where something substantial happens: learning a new spell, improving upon one, learning about a new potion or plant, etc. We want players to look forward to these classes where they progress because of the educational side of Hogwarts. Instead of using talent points that are obtained after leveling up, we are introducing marks for our classes. Each class has its own marks that are tracked through the school year, rising and lowering depending on how well students are doing. We want to tie the progression system into how well the player is doing as a student. Players will automatically unlock all spells by attending classes, but the opportunity to improve spells will only be unlocked if students have high enough marks, depending on the professor's requirements. If classes are a core pillar of the game, then skipping classes must also matter. Once reaching the main portion of the game, the player should be able to skip lessons, but the choice should feel free. Hogwarts is a school, the protagonist is a student, and choosing to not attend a class should have consequences. We don't want the consequences to feel frustrating or too harsh, but to try and present an interesting alternative that has advantages and disadvantages. Missing a lesson will cause a small drop in their marks, and there may be more differences depending on who the professor is. Additionally, if they were to miss a major class, where one is to learn a completely new spell, potion, plant, etc., then they have to find a way to learn that again. This might be directly going to the professor, studying on their own, getting help from fellow students, etc. Additionally, this should play into the protagonist's story and character. If they constantly skip class for whatever reason, the school will notice. For example, this can play into a potential arc where they begin to ignore the core schooling in search of other subjects, say ancient magic. One of my big issues with Hogwarts Legacy is the professors. I get that people like them, but I don't really understand why. They have maybe 5 minutes of screen time, you attend their class once, maybe twice, and you might talk to them once more. My goal is to make each professor feel unique, and I think how they respond to attendance is an interesting way to get the ball rolling. Some professors will care deeply about attendance, others more about the marks of the player. Some will be lenient if the player misses a class or two, while others will become suspicious if the player misses one. Hopefully, this makes it feel more like a group of adults with different standards, values, and teaching styles. Professor Sharp is extremely strict and exact for reasons that we will get into in his own dedicated video. He will have little patience for excuses, carelessness, or repeated mistakes. Professor Ronan, on the other hand, will be much more forgiving and encouraging, especially for players that show curiosity and effort, for reasons that we will also get into in his dedicated video. We want the professors to feel like real authority figures that the students have known for years. Knowing the kids for so long and seeing them grow up, they should notice patterns and react meaningfully to what the player does. This should give the classes and professors more personality and reinforce the role-playing. There's not one universal grade meter that the character has to keep high, but relationships and marks in their classes. As a side note, remember, this is just the beginning. Most professors will have their own dedicated character quests that will explore who they are in much more detail. Speaking on electives for a moment, they should be one of the easiest ways to give each playthrough a slightly different academic identity. Players can choose one elective to add to their schedule. This isn't going to change the main story, just help to make their school life feel more personal. The electives are Arithmancy, Care of Magical Creatures / Beast Studies, Divination, Muggle Studies, and Study of Ancient Runes. If we want this to be a game about a student, then classes need to be more than a brief cutscene. They need to be present, not repetitive or bloated. Hogwarts Legacy needed structure and focus. Classes are perfect to teach and challenge players, not just be background flavor. Ultimately, we want Hogwarts to feel like a school, not just a beautiful location that the player occasionally returns to.